Hello everybody, it's Numbseen News here, and today we've gotten a lot of breaking dates today. And the first news we'll be talking about today is first coming from the United Kingdom. So in the previous video, we talked about how Donald Trump arrived in the United Kingdom, more specifically in Scotland, for talks and trade deals with both the United Kingdom and the European Union, and Donald Trump has done exactly that. So Donald Trump arrived in Scotland on July the 25th, kicking off a 5-day private visit through July the 29th. So upon Donald Trump's arrival, he was greeted by the Scottish Secretary Ian Murray and made several remarks addressing illegal immigration in the United Kingdom and Europe, and praising US and UK trade progress, and describing the Prime Minister of the UK, Keir Starmer, as a good man, despite political differences. So let's just go over the key news coming from Donald Trump's visit to the UK, again, more specifically Scotland. So first, the United States President announced a huge landmark trade deal with the European Union. Donald Trump stated that I think it's the biggest deal ever made. So let's just go over this deal between the European Union and the United States of America. So in short, EU goods will have a 15% tariff entering the United States, while US goods entering the European Union will have a 0% tariff. Instead, the EU has introduced a 15% VAT on all US products in the European markets. The European Union and the United States of America have agreed to zero the tariffs on critical goods as semiconductors, chemicals, aircrafts, pharmaceuticals, and other things, essential goods. Europe will be investing $600 billion in the US and will be buying energy worth of $750 billion, and also buy US weapons worth hundreds of billions of dollars. So the European Union has vowed to now be buying US crude oil and energy, and not buy it from Russia. So the European Union will be buying its energy from the US, or be trying to divert to the United States instead of cheap Russian oil and gas. And also, again, the European Union has announced weapon payments to the United States. So the European Union will also be rearming. Well, NATO will be rearming. But in the end, the EU and von der Leyen, the head of the European Union, kind of simply capitulated in the negotiations. So this is kind of a very one-sided agreement between the United States and EU. A lot of main sources have been stating that the European Union did end up actually capitulating and surrendering to the United States. And obviously, Donald Trump got a very good deal. So that was the agreement between the European Union and the United States. We've also got news that Donald Trump obviously met with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer. So Trump hosted the UK Prime Minister Starmer at his golf resort in Scotland for trade and Gaza talks. So let's just go over the key points from the meeting between Donald Trump and Keir Starmer on the 28th of July between President Donald Trump and UK Prime Minister. The meeting topics, the meetings focused on refining the existing UK and US trade deal, with particular attention on UK steel and aluminium tariff issues. They discussed the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, including the need for increased food aids and planning for a lasting ceasefire. They talked about the broader geopolitical issues such as Ukraine and border control and immigration. The key statements that were made in the meeting between the two leaders: Trump urged tax cuts and tougher illegal immigration measures as a way to counter political rivals like Nigel Farage of the Reform Party in the UK. Starmer welcomed Trump's support for the humanitarian aid and emphasised the UK efforts to facilitate aid drops in Gaza. Both parties agreed that a ceasefire in Gaza is urgently needed. So practically, in summary, the primary focus was refinement of the UK and US trade deal, Gaza ceasefire, and humanitarian aid and immigration policy. So not that much was made. The two leaders just discussed the trade situation between the UK and the US, and also humanitarian aid in the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. So very interesting news. But probably one of the biggest announcements that were made by Donald Trump after the meeting with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. At a press briefing, Trump stated that he will be shortening the 50-day deadline given to Russia to conclude a peace agreement with Ukraine. The US president noted that he is very disappointed in Vladimir Putin, the president of the Russian Federation. So originally, Donald Trump sent an ultimatum to Russia that if the war in Ukraine isn't finished within 50 days and fighting hasn't ceased on the front line, Donald Trump will be setting sanctions and tariffs on secondary tariffs and sanctions on countries that buy Russian oil and energy products, and that's obviously China and India, and some accounts Turkey, which is a NATO member. So Trump's deadline starts today, 10 days before Russia gets hit with tariffs. Donald Trump said that he's very unsure about his own threat to Russia and admits that it may or may not affect Russia. So Trump issues a 10-day ultimatum to Putin and threatens tariffs on Russian oil. The US President Donald Trump has given Russian President Vladimir Putin a 10-day deadline to respond to ceasefire talks regarding the ongoing war in Ukraine, warning that the US will impose significant tariffs if no progress is made. Speaking today, Trump expressed frustration, stating that I have not got any response from Putin. It is a shame. He added that Putin wants to keep the war going, but empathized that the proposed tariffs and the ultimatum to Russia may or may not affect them. On the potential impact on the global markets, Trump dismissed concerns, saying, I don't worry about the oil prices. The move signals escalating tensions as the US considers secondary tariffs targeting countries purchasing Russian oil, which could disrupt Moscow's funding to the war in Ukraine. But we've gotten a response from Moscow. Russia says that it will continue its special military operation in Ukraine to, I quote, protect its interests despite Donald Trump's ultimatum. And we've also gotten some news coming from Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesman. He stated that Russia has built an immunity to sanctions after years under heavy economic pressure. The Kremlin noted on Trump's new sanction ultimatum to Russia. So, very interesting news. And again, in Trump's ultimatum, again, it includes a 100% tariff on both India and China or any other country that buys Russian oil. And again, that might include Turkey. I believe they are importing Russian oil. But China has responded to the ultimatum. China has officially rejected the US demands to stop importing Russian oil. So China will continue buying Russian oil. And India has stated that India is buying energy based on what's on offer on the global situation. So India has practically said in a nice diplomatic words that India will continue buying Russian oil despite the US president's threats, officials say. So very interesting news. We'll continue this subject when we actually get to Russia, but right now let's just get back to the UK. We've also gotten some more news coming from the United Kingdom that the UK is to recognise a Palestinian state in September, the PM Starmer has noted, unless Israel agrees to a ceasefire and a long-term peace. And following the UK, lots of countries are following. France will also be fully recognising the state of Palestine in September, the French foreign minister stated at the UN. Malta will also be recognizing Palestine at a UN General Assembly in September. This was announced by the Maltese Prime Minister. And Canada will be recognizing a Palestinian state in September. The Prime Minister stated Canada will be recognizing a Palestinian state at the next United Nations Assembly in September. The Prime Minister, Mark Carney, announced on Wednesday. So we're seeing a lot of countries are now going to be recognizing Gaza as a Palestine. Not Gaza. Will be recognizing a Palestinian state in September to try and protest Israel's war in Gaza. We've also gotten news that Portugal will be also announcing that will be recognizing a state of Palestine in September at the United Nations. So very interesting news. Israel has responded that the UK will pay if it backs jihadist states. Jihadist state on Israel's border today will threaten Britain's tomorrow, stated the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, reacting to these coalitions of countries recognizing a Palestinian state. So, very interesting news. So let's just get back to Russia. And furthermore, the next news we'll be talking about today is coming from the Russian Federation. So we've gotten some news today that's the president of the Belarusian Republic, Alexander Lukashenko, met Vladimir Putin in a state visit on the island of Valam, near the city of St. Petersburg and near the Finnish border. So, today, Vladimir Putin and Alexander Lukashenko held an informal meeting on the island of Falam. So let's just go over the main points that were made by the two leaders. So according to Putin, the main goal in the special military operation is to eradicate the causes of the crisis in Ukraine and ensure Russia's security. The security of the Russian Federation and Ukraine can be ensured in the context of common European security. Information, according to Putin, about the catchment of Chasiv Yar is completely accurate. The Russian armed forces, apparently, according to Putin, captured it several days ago. So he's talking about this city here, Chasiv Yar, near the major strategic point of Bakhmut. So, according to Putin, the Russian forces have captured that. According to Putin as well, Russian troops are advancing along the entire line of contact in Ukraine. According to Putin, again, the leadership of Ukraine is not very informed about the events at the front, since it denies the capture of Chasiv Yar by the Russian armed forces. According to Putin, positive activity in the special military operation is achieved thanks to the courage of heroism of the Russian fighters. Putin expects that the issue of supplying Oroshenik ballistic missiles and ballistic systems to Belarus will be resolved by the end of the year, and the location is being chosen. So if you don't remember, Russia unleashed one of its newly Oroshenik ballistic missiles, which they shot into Ukraine, and Ukraine couldn't even shoot it down, even with Patriot systems nearby. So Putin will be deploying these Oroshenik ballistic missiles and systems to Belarus at the end of the year. We've also got news that the president of Belarus, Lukashenko, says that Europe is heading towards deindustrialization, downfall. Instead of fighting us, Belarus and Russia, Europe should have united with Russia, and he adds that a united Europe and Russia would have been a nightmare for the Americans, according to Belarusian President Lukashenko. Lukashenko also stated that Ukraine must run to President Putin and ask him for negotiations. Otherwise, in a month or maybe two, the whole front line will collapse, reclaiming territories. So, interesting news. And also, the Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko criticized Donald Trump's recent ultimatum to Russia, saying that his approach lacks the caution and seriousness needed for real diplomacy. If he wants peace, he must get involved carefully and thoroughly. That's not how politics is done. And furthermore, after the meeting between the Russian president and the Belarusian president, we've gotten news that a new Cold War between Russia and America might have just started. So we've just gotten some breaking updates today that Donald Trump has decided to deploy 2 nuclear submarines to, I quote, appropriate regions because the former president of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, has decided to make some provocative statements. So according to Donald Trump here in the bottom left corner, based on the highly provocative statements of the former president of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, who is now the deputy chairman of the Security Council of the Russian Federation, I have ordered 2 nuclear submarines to be positioned in the appropriate regions, just in case these foolish and inflammatory statements are more than just that. Words are very important and can often lead to unintended consequences. I hope this will not be one of those instances. So, it is true, on August the 1st, 2025, the US president formally announced that he had ordered 2 nuclear submarines to be moved to strategic positions closer to Russian waters in response to what he described as highly provocative remarks made by Dmitry Medvedev, now the deputy chair of the Russia Security Council and former president of Russia. So Medvedev, the former president of Russia, publicly criticized Trump's ultimatum over Ukraine, branding it as a threat and warning that it could escalate towards a direct war between Russia and the United States. In response, Trump shortened the 50-day ceasefire window down to 10 days and threatened sanctions if Russia didn't comply by August the 8th. So, Trump's justification: Trump defended the submarine's repositioning as precautionary move to protect US citizens, empathizing the seriousness of nuclear statements on the Russian side and the importance of avoiding unintended consequences. So, very interesting news. So, Trump has just ordered 2 nuclear armed submarines to be moved closer to Russian waters. So this has the capability of evolving into something big, because Russia could double down here and actually deploy nuclear submarines closer to American waters. So this has a very big potential possibility of evolving into something very big. But at the current time of recording, the Russian President Vladimir Putin has announced the mass production of the hypersonic nuclear-capable Oreshnik missile systems, with plans to deploy it to Belarus by the end of the year, and potentially positioning them it closer to the US mainland. Obviously, this follows the US President Donald Trump's order to reposition 2 nuclear submarines near Russia. So, according to news we've gotten, Russia might be deploying these Oreshnik ballistic hypersonic nuclear-capable ballistic missiles to maybe closer to the US mainland, and potentially deploy these to Cuba. So, very big news. We've got news that according to the Ukraine's intel chief Budanov, Russia plans to spend $1.1 trillion on the rearmament of Russia over 11 years in its biggest military buildup since the USSR, says Ukraine's intel chief Budanov. And furthermore, actually, while on the topic of Ukraine, the next news is from Ukraine. So a couple days, I believe yesterday now, Russia launched a huge drone attack on Kiev, and in this attack, Russia unleashed a new weapon. So Russia is now using jet-powered Uranium 238 drones in massive strikes on Kiev. So instead of the standard propeller Shahad or /Uranium drones, Russia is now putting jet engines on these drones. Now they now fly much faster and up to 370 miles per hour, and show up like cruise missiles on regular radar systems, making them much harder to intercept. So according to BBC, these jet Shahad drones that attacked Kiev at night are almost impossible to shoot down, according to the BBC. So the speed of such drones exceeds 500 kilometers an hour, and the flight range can be 2,500 kilometers. In addition, due to their high speed and maneuverability, such drones are difficult to detect and intercept. So Russia, instead of using the standard propeller system, are now putting jet engines on these Shahad drones, and according to BBC, they are almost impossible to shoot down. So we'll probably be able to see these in the future more and more common. And furthermore, the next news we've got today is coming from Germany. So we've got news that the German parliament is now planning rearmament bills, and billions of dollars are projected to be spent in preparations. So according to Bloomberg, Germany plans to submit more than 60 armament projects for parliamentary approval by the end of 2025. This includes 20 Eurofighter jets, up to 5,000 Boxer armored vehicles, at least 3,500 Panzer infantry fighting vehicles. In addition, the acquisition of several hundred Leopard 2 battle tanks are being examined. The goal is a massive strengthening of Germany's capabilities as part of the Sendoa investments. So Germany is planning to submit more than 60 armament projects for parliamentary approval by the end of 2025, and Germany plans to acquire more than 20 Eurofighter fighter jets, up to 5,000 Boxer armored vehicles, up to 3,500 Patria infantry fighting vehicles, and examine several hundred Leopard 2 battle tanks. So very interesting news. Along with this, we've also got news that Germany's armed forces have reported a 28% surge in new recruits so far this year, their largest increase in years. More than 13,700 individuals have enlisted in the German army, with growing interest seen in both military and civilian positions. And furthermore, the next news we'll be talking about today is coming from Israel. So we've got news that the Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, met with Trump's Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. So the US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff met with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, to talk about both humanitarian efforts in Gaza and ways to end the war between Israel and Hamas. And along with the US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff's meeting with the Prime Minister of Israel, Steve Witkoff also arrived in major hubs in Rafah, this major city here in Gaza, southern Gaza, to look at the current situation and humanitarian aid himself. So we can see here in the bottom left corner, we can see Steve Witkoff actually look at the current situation in the humanitarian sector in Gaza. The next news we'll be talking about today is coming from Yemen. So we've got news that the Yemeni Houthis have announced new military escalation. According to the Yemeni Houthis, we will target all ships tied to companies working with Israeli ports in any location, regardless of the nationality, regardless of the destination. So the Yemeni Houthis have vowed military escalation, and according to the Houthis, we will target all ships tied to companies working with Israeli ports. So maybe in the next couple of days we can see renewed Houthi attacks on civilian ships in the Red Sea and the Strait of Aden again. So very interesting news. The next news we've got today is coming from Ethiopia. We've got news that heavy artillery deployment is being noted near the Eritrean border. So newly obtained footage shows the presence of the Ethiopian heavy artillery units positioned near key strategic points close to the Eritrean border. The deployment appears to be a part of the broader military buildup in the area, possibly aimed at reinforcing border defences or responding to increased tensions in the region. So the Ethiopian armed forces are deploying huge amounts of heavy artillery on the border of the Eritrean border. Obviously, in the past couple of months, Ethiopia has been vowing that it needs a port, and it will do anything to achieve such a point. So Ethiopia is currently now looking to gain a port or access to sea, even if it means force. The next and final news today is coming from the United States of America. So we've got a lot of economic news coming today. So we've got news that's first, Trump has announced a 25% import duty on India starting from August the 1st. Additionally, India will pay a fine exceeding the 25% duty, including the purchase of Russian energy and resources and weapons. So, Trump has announced the introduction of a 25% import duty on India starting today. The US president also says that a deal has been concluded with Pakistan in which both countries will jointly develop Pakistan's massive oil reserves. This comes after Trump slapped India with 25% tariffs and sanctions for trading with Russia. So, very big news as well. Trump has also announced trade deals with South Korea. President Donald Trump announced a new trade agreement with South Korea, stating that South Korea will invest $350 billion in the US owned projects and purchase over $100 billion worth of American liquid natural gas and other energy products. We've also got news today that's because August the 1st is now here. Donald Trump's new tariff rates have officially gone into force. Well, Donald Trump will now be signing these into acts. So if you can see here in the bottom left corner, I'll try and fit it on your screen. Donald Trump has now unleashed huge amounts of tariffs on dozens and dozens amounts of countries. So Donald Trump's tariffs have officially now come into place. And with this, over $1.1 trillion in the market value in the stock market of the United States have already been lost today, marking one of the largest and single-day losses in recent months across major indices and companies. And furthermore, the last news we've got today is that Mark Zuckerberg has announced that we have begun to see glimpses of our AI systems improving themselves, and developing super intelligence is now in sight. So billionaire and AI developer Mark Zuckerberg has announced that he has now been making an AI that is now improving itself, and now apparently, according to Mark Zuckerberg, are developing super intelligence, and apparently it is now in sight. So, very concerning news. And that is all the news I've gotten for you today. I am Non-Scene News. I'll try and provide you news that medias around the world do not show you. I'll hopefully be doing these videos, hopefully every day, so consider subscribing and liking. If you like what I do here, please consider donating, the link in the description below, either becoming a member of the channel or donating in the PayPal link. You can also join my Telegram channel where I upload news that I just can't fit in these videos, or I'm not able to show due to YouTube's guidelines. So again, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all later. Bye.